In the last module, we looked at human working memory capacity as one of the important features about our brain architecture that shapes the kinds of inferences we make. Now we want to look at the evolutionary origins of humans and proto-humans to get some insight into how they might have shaped native human inference abilities. So when we're talking about the time frame for human and proto-human evolution, or as scientists refer to it, hominini evolution, we're talking about a time frame that can go from the long end of about 7 million years to a shorter end of around 4.4 million years. Now, of this time period, Homo sapiens, or anatomically modern humans, have only been around for about 200,000 years. So most of the time that we're talking about here is time before human beings, anatomically modern human beings anyway, even existed. Now, for almost all that period, in fact, that period up to about 10 or 12,000 years ago, humans and proto-humans were living a hunter-gatherer existence. They would spend about 1,000 calories to get about 1,000 calories. They would hunt things, they would gather things, they would have no structures, they had very primitive tools, and so on. So when we're thinking about the sort of environment that human beings evolved to solve problems in, the sorts of problems that they evolved to solve, this period of time is really the period of time that we want to look at to see how it might have shaped native human inference abilities. So the basic capacities and innate dispositions that drive human inferences probably evolved during this period of human and proto-human evolution. And frankly, the last 10 to 12,000 years has hardly seen any significant evolution in human beings. Hunter-gatherers were how most humans and proto-humans lived up until the Neolithic Revolution, and so they lived relatively short lives. They had very few tools or other artifacts, little technology or social development. They tended to live in relatively small groups that are relatively isolated from other anatomically modern humans. Now, these facts shape an environment in which human hunter-gatherers and proto-human hunter-gatherers solve problems, and the sorts of problems that they solve. So humans and proto-humans are making inferences in relatively small, relatively stable, and relatively homogeneous environments. Now, if you look at that span of 4.47 million years, you might notice things like, oh, look, there were ice ages, there was this, there was that, right? This is true, but the average hunter-gatherer did not live very long, certainly didn't live long enough to see significant things like ice ages come and go. So because their lives are relatively short, because they have only their feet to get around with, their habitats are small. Their habitats are relatively stable because things like climate change don't occur at a fast enough pace to affect the lives of the vast majority of those individuals. And because they're small and stable, they're also relatively homogeneous. If you were to stick a pin in a map somewhere around the world, you would trace a little circle of 30 miles around that pin, you would find that it's pretty homogeneous in its nature. So given their existence, a hand-to-mouth existence, and since their environment remains stable and homogeneous during an average individual hunter-gatherer's lifetime, their inferences are largely reactions to specific problems at hand. That is, their inferences need to work for specific content, the problem they're faced with, and context, the situation in which it's presented, limiting hunter-gatherer problem solving to largely reactive, relatively simple, and concrete problem solving that's linked to specific content and context. Now, how that plays out in terms of human inference abilities, we'll look at in the next module.